speaker today is Joy Bonaguro. Did I say it right? Close enough. I should have checked in with you. I'm sorry. She's Chief Data Officer for the City and County of San Francisco. She is the first Chief Data Officer, and she manages the city's open data program. Joy has spent more than a decade working at the nexus of public policy, data, and technology. She's worked from the birth of the open data and open government field, spending 7 years designing and managing the development of information systems to support planning and decision-making at the Greater New Orleans Community Data. But we are pleased to welcome her back to the Bay Area. Prior to joining the city, Joy worked with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to help develop technology, cyber, and privacy policy, working closely with the National Lab's CIO, Council, and the Department of Energy Information Management Advisory Group. Joy earned her master's degree from UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy, where she focused on IT policy, and we are so delighted to have her back on the Berkeley campus. Please join me in welcoming Joy.
Thank you so much. Transition. I'll just go ahead and start. So if you take public transit and you have one of these, you've probably benefited from the value of open data. So I don't remember what I did before I had this wonderful app called BART Runner that is essentially consuming real-time data from the BART system, and it tells me it's coming in 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, which allows me to sort of, stay at work longer. Or I don't know, so maybe you don't have a smartphone, probably most of you all do, but if you've ever checked the weather, you've benefited from the value of open data. Ever since NOAA started releasing their weather data and people have built services and data services off of it, you've benefited from open data. But I came into the city of San Francisco and I wanted to actually broaden the value of open data beyond just maps and data services. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. And so stepping back, I like to say that open data isn't just about publishing machine-readable data so we can all create our fun little apps and do crazy stuff with it. I think it's about creating and facilitating broad change. So if we have an open data portal, it enables a data-driven ecosystem. And this supports research and analysis, not just apps, performance dashboards, program assessments, as well as the sort of ubiquitous, well-known web and mobile app structure. And even then, who cares? So what? What we actually care about is we care about a range of positive outcomes, from increased quality of life, my BART app makes me happier, more efficient city services, better decisions, and then new businesses that are building, consuming government data and deriving and adding value to it, including economic activity. In San Francisco, our open data program started in 2009, and it was what I call the executive edict phase of open data, where our mayor said, "Thou shalt publish open data," and everyone's like, "What the hell is this thing?" And so, and people are like, "Okay, I don't know quite what open data is," but then we sort of started with what we call the publishing scramble, and it was like, sort of running around and just throwing data up there, not really maybe paying attention to metadata, which if you're a data scientist, you probably really care about things like metadata. I certainly do from an analysis perspective. And we didn't sort of pay attention to things like data quality necessarily, or how to keep the data maintained and updated. But we did have great many successes. We have lots of open apps. You can go to our showcase at Data SF and see all the open apps that we've lost track. We can't keep track of it anymore. As well as pioneering data standards, so standard ways in which to push out civic data so that apps can predictably consume and repurpose and use that data across different localities. As well as, and we continue to be top ranked, though I want us to be better, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. But then we moved into what I call the period of stagnation, where our sort of rate of publication really, really started to slow down. And most of the data sets, we haven't had a lot more. And there's probably a couple different reasons for that. All the low-hanging fruit was done, or it hasn't been as systematic as it could be. And so before I came on, we entered into what I call phase 4, the resource reckoning. And this was really about deciding that, OK, we're going to actually designate roles that will be responsible and accountable for actually executing on the city's open data program. And then hopefully I would like to integrate this into the initiative. If open data is just something you do on the side and it's kind of fun, it's not actually how the city does business, it will sort of flounder and not be successful. So how to do that? So how to broaden? To do that, I think the traditional value proposition of open data, since it's been so focused on those mobile apps and things, people in city government, they're like, that's nice, but I'm really busy and I'm actually trying to execute on my job. So a key part for me was like, how do you get people in the city to see internal value for open data? And so my strategy for this was find, feel, and fix the pain, right? And so how to find the pain and how to find the data pains in the city. And so within the city of San Francisco, we have something called the citywide analyst network. And the citywide analyst network is essentially analysts, our top analysts who work across the city and do analytical work. A lot of them are masters of public policy, people like me, or some economists, some MBAs. It's sort of a mix of people. And so what I did was I wanted to sort of go out there and find out what are their challenges around using data. And so the first question I asked them is, how do you actually go about accessing data within the city? And I asked them in two ways. I said, one, how do you access data within your own department? And then how do you access data between departments? And sort of the answers were kind of surprising to me. A lot did use existing information systems, so that's good, right? When we're talking about data analysis, the closer you are to the origin of the data, probably the better your analysis is going to be. But there was a heavy dependence on interpersonal relationships around accessing data, which really slows down the pace of analysis and what we can do in terms of improving our decision making. And between departments, this problem was exacerbated. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is sort of a challenge that we can work on. And then I said, okay, when you do go to access data from other departments, what are the sort of challenges that you have around accessing that data? And lack of knowledge that the data even exists and knowing who to contact were way up there. And so I'm like, okay, if we're actually going to increase use of data in decision making, forget fancy data science methods. We actually have to know what data we have and then have a consistent way of accessing it. And my central hypothesis is that data SF can help solve our internal data sharing challenges. And by doing that, we broaden the value, we broaden the investment of open data, all to the purpose of actually increasing the use of data in decision making, not just because it's fun. And essentially, I sort of took the barriers to using data in city as my kind of checklist of things to try and solve, and structured our entire strategic plan around what I call the knowledge, access, and use barriers with the goal of facilitating broad change. So our strategic plan, I won't belabor it. You can go online. It's at datasf.org. But very quickly, our first goal is increase the number and timeliness of data sets on DataSF. We have data sets up there, and I occasionally get contacted by people from Berkeley who are like, oh, we would love to use this, for a class and that sort of thing. I'm like, yeah, it hasn't been updated in a while. So we want them to be timely so that they're relevant, especially for mobile apps and that sort of thing. Timely data is very important. Next, improve the usability of DataSF. I love the iSchool. I have a background in user-centered design, and when I came on and saw our website, I about choked because it was a usability nightmare. And so we're slowly making progress in that, but what good is having data up there if it's impossible to find? I've been saying an open data dump is not, is essentially the opposite of open data. And then improve the usability, quality, and consistency of our data. And this is obviously a key challenge, but it's a multi-year challenge, and it's quite complex, especially when you couple this with bad information technology systems and old information technology systems that may or may not have things like basic data validation. And then enable use of confidential data, which is a totally different conversation I'm not going to go into. And then support increased use of data and foster innovation. And today I'm going to focus on goal 5. But like I said, if you do want to read our entire strategic plan as well as like our quarterly progress, it's all open and online, just for consistency. But goal 5. So going back to the sort of central hypothesis, so if we have this shared ecosystem of technology and data, ideally we want to, 1, increase individual skills and capacity to use that data. But 2, we also want to support analytical work within departments. You can have awesome analysis and work, but if they're not tied to the decision makers, it's useless, and your value chain of data analysis is sort of broken. And then lastly, you can have departments making awesome decisions, but if the public debate is underinformed, then you may not come to the best process anyway. And so that's what I call foster a data-enabled policy environment, with the thesis being that that will lead to increased use of data in decision making. And it's worth noting in the political space and in the government space, there's just no such thing as perfect data-driven decision-making. Not everywhere that's true. Somewhere value, judgment comes into play. I don't know, I forget what the condition is called, but there's essentially a neurological condition that can turn you into Spock. And you're like, oh, great, I'm a perfect analytical machine, except then it turns out you'll never have enough data to actually complete a decision-making cycle. Like, what will make you choose between that black or that blue pen? There's no rational reason. At some point, you're just like, I'm feeling blue, right? So, how to really support this data-enabled policy environment? And so the strategy that we sort of landed on was like, look for these really challenging information problems. And so I started in the city sort of end of February. And when I came there, and as I'm sure all of you know, this thing called affordable housing is kind of a big deal. And so I'm like, OK, this is a big deal. Let me find out more about this issue. And so I started to Google, and with the goal of like trying to answer, well, I'm new. What does the city do about affordable housing? Enter, web confusion, right? There's so many different resources out there, all sorts of things. And then along the way, I sort of ran into, of course, I'm a data geek. I'm a policy person. I like to quantify things. Sorry. And I would come across newspaper articles, and so I would be looking for reliable data, and there'd be a newspaper article, and it'd be like, it'd have like a graphic. And then I'd come to another website, and it'd maybe have a map, and I'd be like, well, OK, but can I play with this data? Can I download it? Like, where's this coming from? Where's the reliable source that I can use around this issue? And sort of the answers to these two questions were the problem that I sort of found. And it goes anywhere from not sure to like, there's so many places to go. You have to go here, and then you go here, and then you go there, and then if you link that together, then you find this. And that's, not possible, right? And so trying to solve this problem was sort of the first one that I wanted to tackle in terms of this data-enabled policy environment. And so the solution is the Housing Data Hub. We're still iterating on the name. There's many things going on here. And so essentially, this is a single place to get an overview of housing in the city. It's not launched yet. Description of policies and programs, but then supporting data and visualizations. And so I'll just walk you through a quick preview of this. We haven't launched it yet, but we're about to. So if you come to the home page, you'll be able to start with some basic context on housing. You'll be able to learn about the policies and programs, the alphabet soup. So this is where a lot of times data gets divorced from context. And so we're trying to provide the context in a very digestible, you don't need to be an expert kind of way. And then if you're already familiar with the housing programs, go ahead and dive into the data and swim around. And so let's just walk through each one. So housing overview, just a quick overview. We used this awesome framework built on D3, if there's any D3 fans out there, called C3. It's really cool. It's like templates for D3. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out. And so there's a basic overview for people who don't really understand anything about the basic numbers in the city. And then they can go into the policy area where we've created these lenses where you can look at, oh, does this focus on people or housing units? And then what level of income does it focus on? And just very quick, pithy descriptions of what it is so you can sort of read at a glance. What are all these different programs? What is this portfolio of programs in the city? And then you can learn and go through and learn what all these like strange words mean. I was never a housing person, and I was sort of overwhelmed by it, and sort of having to parse all this language was very challenging. So we tried to parse it for you. And then you can go straight into the data browser where we have a variety of maps, bar charts, whatever is appropriate, so leveraging good information design to select the right visualization so people can go ahead and explore it. And then we're also taking a page from anyone familiar with gov.uk's transformation initiative? Yeah. Okay, data science people. Okay, so this is they're essentially saying, okay, we have a lot of government services out there, and we're going to sort of transform them, and we're going to introduce different language about how we're going to re-deliver government services, where we're going to say, okay, it's a mess, we're going to do alpha phase to make it better, and we're going to keep moving through these phases. And so we're sort of adopting that language of don't wait for perfection. Instead, we have data sets that are in the discovery phase. We're trying to understand what's out there. We have data sets that are in the visualization phase, and then nothing's done until it's automated and everyone can slurp it up in machine-readable manner on data SF. And so through that, we're hoping to take this sort of really complex issue, contextualize it, pull out all the programmatic data, and so have what we're arriving at a term that we're calling strategic releases of data. Since data's been this sort of drip, 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 drip with open data programs, what we want to do is try to introduce strategic releases, where we take a whole body of data so you can sort of holistically look at a challenge or a problem in a city. And so how to do that? You identify candidates. Do you have a pressing information gap or need? Is there inefficient reporting? There's a lot of copy, paste, copy, paste. For reporting, how can we leverage open data systems to streamline and simplify reporting? High public interest and concern, like affordable housing. And then complex cross-departmental in the city. Cities are in agencies develop within their programmatic areas. So how can you leverage information and information sharing platforms to foster interdepartmental conversations that ideally lead to better solutions for complex problems? And then leverage the open data program to expose the key data sets and provide context and visualizations. And so we'll continue to pursue this strategic release strategy for other kinds of data sets. And hopefully it will help us really increase the internal value of open data that will then sustain the sort of change we need through what is essentially a hard process to go about identifying, inventorying, in describing and then automating the publication of open data. So with that, I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
So it sounds like the government actually took the initiative here, like the executive kind of took the initiative to get started on the data. Is that like accurate, or was there some necessary convincing?
For the open data program itself? Yeah, that's right. I think the sort of familiar pattern you're seeing is the executive edict phase, right? Where some leader has to be like, let's do this.
But who convinced him? Or how did he get on board?
Oh, so this was Newsom back in 2009, and I think, to the extent that he was interested in innovation and technology, and open data was just starting to bubble up, and he wanted to push it, right? And then I think, and slowly it's becoming more and more commonplace, I would say, around the country. I forget when Oakland has their open data policy and things like that. And, but I do think it needs that executive push, right? Because it's a shift and there's some culture change there. But it also requires resources. Like we had the do it, but the sort of resourcing and the programmatic aspects weren't figured out. And so I've essentially been rebuilding our whole program.
Please, when you ask your questions, use a mic. We have people on each side.
Oh, I'm picking? Oh my God! Wow. Okay. I feel so powerful.
Thank you. Thanks for choosing me.
Oh, come on! Don't start that. I'm just gonna do this. Okay.
So I guess this is really cool to hear, and it seems really forward-thinking, and it makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm wondering, what do you think about sort of the federal government's like data.gov initiative, and where does that fall in the range of this? Where is it headed? I don't know. Much.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. So the data, we actually federate with data.gov, so you can slurp up our data from data.gov. I would say I think the challenge in both our space and the federal space is that it becomes overwhelming. And you go on data.gov and there's, I think, hundreds of thousands of data sets, some which may or may not have been documented properly, and the metadata issue is a real thing. When we surveyed metadata standards, there wasn't a lot of enforcement. And so I think I spoke recently with the woman who's heading sort of communications and outreach with data.gov, and I think their strategy to sort of deal with that complexity is really smart. What they've done is they've convened working groups, essentially on major issues like energy and that sort of thing, and they meet every couple weeks to talk about like what new data sets are coming out, and I think we'll certainly look to that model. But it's sometimes maybe hard to figure out how to tap into that, right? Because you kind of need the publishers to sort of sort through the complexity for you. And I think one of the things we'll be doing is we'll be creating little subscriptions things, so when there's going to be a change, we'll let you know and stuff like that. But the sort of fostering the communities of learning, I think, is going to have to be the direction that we're going to pursue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your target audience for? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Good morning. Who's your target audience for your new site that you're about to launch, affordable housing?
The housing one? So that's policymakers, decision makers, and advocacy community groups, and essentially everyone who's interested in the issue and wants to learn more about it and understand more about it. And then someone gave me a great idea the other day that it could be a great tool to sort of reach out to students in high school and be like, hey, this is like a resource, and this is your government, this is what they're doing, this is the data about what they're doing. So, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. Oh wait, I feel it. Okay, and then I'm gonna switch to that side, and I know I am.
Thank you. So one of the challenges we as data scientists face is when different cities, different organizations publish data in different formats.
Yeah.
So is there an effort to standardize it across different groups, different organizations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the whole point to me of the open data portals is to be publishing it in a standard form. Well, so there's the standard format in terms of the technology and the structure, and then there's the standard in terms of the fields. Yeah, so two different questions. So yours is the field one?
No, the field one.
Yeah, so that one's very hard, and I think there's been, like, we've participated in the creation of a couple different standards around the restaurant inspection standard, and that's something, also housing inspections. One thing that we're in search of, so if anyone out there, is a sort of structural and governance and funding model to sustain standards across cities and localities, because if I publish my data one way, and let's say you want to do a city countrywide analysis on building inspections, the fact that we're all publishing it differently is sort of annoying. I mean, it keeps you all in business as data scientists, but it's also super annoying. And so the data standards, though, it's sort of slow moving, and like Code for America has done stuff around that, but it's not clear they want to stay on that. So that's in search of a model, I would say, right now. In the meantime, though, we're going to pursue sort of what we're calling local standards for like consistently reporting similar things like capital projects across multiple departments and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's an issue. Mm-hmm. Or you could say big data will solve it. Just dump it out there and it'll magically slurp it up and figure it out. I've had people make that pitch to me as well. So, okay, you were, yes. I love your blue.
Thank you so much. Very wonderful presentation. My question is, during the data hub building process, have you ever considered inviting the Silicon Valley private business involvement? Do you think if you invite them, could make the process more faster, more robust, something like that?
Bringing in private companies to help us? Yeah, so we love anyone to use our data once it's out there. I think our challenges right now are just sort of basic organizational process, and then the ETL challenge, right? Everyone familiar with ETL? Extract, transform, load, basically how to put the hooks in the system and pull out the data, and then do it in a way that manages privacy and sensitive data and that sort of thing. So bringing in private sort of companies to sort of get their hooks into our back-end systems when there might be privacy implications in there, that's harder, right? And so I think that's the trick there, and I think part of it's also just having the process in place. Here's where I would like companies to help. I want, all your sort of web application providers, your Salesforces, all of that to sort of create integrations with open data platforms, so we can just they can solve that for us. I'm not sure they're interested in solving it for us because maybe they want the data to stay in their system.
This is the last question, which is great.
All the pressure.
Yeah, you said something about one of the main reasons for accessing data is that people know the information personally. But what is the motivation for a person to share the data? In my experience, most of the people keep it for themselves, so they have a control and power. So what is the motivation, and how did you make it to convince people that we're sharing data, they don't lose their control?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And so I think, the knowledge is power sort of concept. There's an AI, I don't think it's as big of a deal as people think it is. I think that's one side of it. But I am there's really two ways that I'm tackling this. One is language, right? And I've sort of abolished the term data owner from everything. I'm like, no, we have no data owners. We have data stewards, right? You are a steward. You keep this safe for the benefit of all. And so I think one is language. Two is, has anyone here read Switch? Yeah, a couple? Okay. I talked about this recently at exactly this issue, which is the intrinsic motivation issue, right? And so what we did is, I'll give you my 2-second version of Switch if I have time. Or it's not 2 seconds, it's like 30 seconds. So Switch basically says, if you're trying to introduce change in very complex, any environment, but especially a very complex organizational environment, we have 28,000 employees, we have 50-some departments, you have to sort of do 3 things. One is direct the writer, so provide the intellectual motivation for what you're doing. When I show the data from the analyst to people, the data stewards across the city, they really like that idea. They're like, oh, our analysts, oh, we're creating pain for them. They really like that. So that appealed to their brain. But they're still worried about how to go about doing this. This is in addition to their extra duties. And so the second element they talk about in Switch is how to motivate the elephant. Because if the rider wants to go in the right direction, but the elephant's like, oh, straw. You gotta reconcile these two. So if you can get the motivation aligned with the brain, that would be great. And so what we're doing to help with that is we're doing simulations around like, okay, now you've heard about how they've had to painfully hunt for data. Now it's your turn. And we set up this simulation where they had 20 minutes to identify 2 data sets and compile the data. One was easy to get on Data SF. The other one was really impossible and on a PDF that you couldn't even copy and paste from. And so having them feel that experience to foster the motivation. And then I think the third sort of element in Switch, not 2, 3, is shaping the path. So we're providing a lot of support and removing the barriers and making things as easy as possible. So like metadata, compliance rates for people finishing metadata in other cities are very low. So we're making that as seamless and actually kind of fun with like pretty icons and like something that's a delight to use. And we're breaking things down into very digestible steps. And so I think when you have an open data program where it's like publish, but no one's giving you the tools and resources to do it, good luck. So we're trying to provide the tools and resources to smooth and shape that path to make it simpler. It's a whole change management strategy.
Thank you so much, Joy.
Okay. All right, thank you.